Okay, so what we're going to record it. And then, hold on, give me. There we go. Okay, so the mouse is over here. So then here's your clicker.
Okay. All right, and we started. Good morning, guys. I'm gonna go ahead and start. I think a couple people were in the bathroom, but we're gonna go ahead and start. So I had a really hard time as I was putting this together because it's such a broad topic and every state is different. Is everybody here from the US? There's no foreigners or international folks, right? Okay. Because that got complicated too, because I have no idea.
Watching virtually.
That there could be. So this is really intended for those of us in the States. And it is different from state to state, but I try to make it kind of as generic as possible and really more of kind of like the beginning stages of how to even start thinking about this. I didn't get real into super specific, and I at the end have a ton of resources really to start brainstorming for each individual, like just to get ideas of what's out there, what's available, what do you need, what can you do ahead of time to get things in place. Real quick about ourselves, Stephanie and Todd Watkins. Noah is our oldest of four. He was diagnosed at age 4 with a mitochondrial disease, and then at age 19 with SATB2. So we think somehow they're connected, not 100% sure. Noah lives in a group home just outside of Washington, DC. And I'll tell his story in a little bit. I have a slide about his situation. I work in the disability field. I currently have my own company. I work as a support broker. So I support people in the state of Maryland that choose adult services. They choose to what we call self-direct their services. So rather than go with traditional services through agencies, individuals can choose to self-direct and kind of get a budget, approved by the state and have, very strict guidelines how to use that budget, but they kind of get rid of the middleman and they can hire their own staff, get a little more autonomy in what their program can look like. But it is not a perfect situation or perfect program for everybody. Self-direction. Noah is not in self-direction. He is in traditional services because that's what works best for our family and for Noah. So that's just a little bit about ourselves. How come I can't get that? Here, you work that.
Okay.
It's not going. Is it the arrow?
We have help on the way.
Should I just click here? Ah,
There
there we
we
go.
go.
Okay. All right. So there is not one perfect solution. Biggest mistake I made was early on, I had a plan. I had this beautiful plan. My parents lived next door. One day we were going to buy my parents' house. Our house is a rancher. Noah was going to live there. We were going to turn it into a group home. It was just beautiful. I had this great plan and I put all my energy and effort into that plan. And around 18, 19, it became very clear that Noah could not live in our house anymore. And Noah didn't like being in the country. Noah likes being very urban. He likes the busyness. He likes looking out his window and seeing lots of cars. You look at our house and you see deer and wild turkey and all kinds of wildlife, which he has no interest in. So my plan just kind of fell completely apart, and I didn't know even what else was out there. I didn't have backup plans. I was very stuck on my plan. So biggest suggestion is to be open-minded. There is not one perfect solution. There's lots of options, and each one kind of has a different course, but just stay open-minded to what's out there.
And it may be that there are different options for different phases of life.
Right, exactly. How sustainable is your plan? So one of the things, especially those of you who have younger kids, really, I think when you get, we have young adult kids now, and we're becoming more and more aware of our mortality, and we're not always going to be here. My biggest fear is outliving Noah, but that's probably going to happen. So keep that in mind, like whatever you plan to do.
Your biggest fear is Noah outliving you.
Noah outliving me, sorry.
Yes.
That's my biggest fear, is me passing away, Noah being left here. He has wonderful siblings that you probably met his sister Hannah, who's here this week. Fantastic siblings, but they are entering their adult lives, and as close as they've been growing up, his one brother is going to be his military, is going to travel the world. Hannah lives a good 2 hours from him now. They're starting their adult lives, and I don't want that burden that they have to stay close. They want to be involved, but that daily involvement's probably not going to happen. So we're trying to create a plan that makes it feasible that they can still be really involved in his life, but his daily care is, not their responsibility.
And that's one of the things we like about the current situation with him living in the group home is he's in there with an agency running that home. And while we have lots of input into that process right now, and there's lots of things that we love about it, and there's lots of things we don't love about the current situation. And so we're constantly intervening, and it scares us a little bit to think about that situation happening, and that would be sustainable, right? Like if something happened to us right now, that situation would go on and be sustainable, but we worry about the fact that we wouldn't be there to intervene about the things that we don't like.
Right. And then one of the things I talk to people about, I have a friend who just every time she's around Noah afterwards, she'll say, it's just so sad. It's just so sad. It drives me crazy. I'm sure you all have experienced people like that. The fact that he can't talk, the fact that he's limited. But I say to her, I have 4 children and he's my happiest child. He's always, 99, we were just talking about 99.98% of the time, he's happy. We have our moments, we have our frustrations. But what do you want for your kids? You want them to feel productive and be happy. And he has that. He has a busy day every day. He goes out and he does stuff. He volunteers. He has an active, it's been hard with COVID, but we're getting back to it. And he's very happy. He has friends. So make that like your mark. Like, don't base it off of, like, do they have a job or how many words are they saying? Or, base it off of what you're getting from, how you feel their rating of happiness in their life is. I would use that as your marker and nothing else, honestly. And then get sibling input, because the siblings, like was said yesterday, are going to be the ones later in life that are going to probably take over in some way for you. So I'd be getting their input along the way, sharing your ideas, your plans. This is what we're thinking. And get their input on that, whether they're older or younger. Noah is the oldest, and we've gotten, his youngest brother is 20, and we've gotten a lot of input from him. And he has a lot of great ideas. And my kids will come to me and say, I don't think you did that. You should have done it this way, or you should do this. So they'll correct me on. Hannah's constantly telling me, you do too much for him. You treat him like a baby. So, it's good to have that open communication with your kids. And when you talk about housing, definitely include them in that.
And we've seen that in a very practical way since he's lived in the group home now for 6 years.
6 years.
6 years. He does much more on his own than he ever did living with us. Right. And now I had a staff member from his house the other day. We were having lunch and I was feeding Noah some of the stuff. And the staff member from his house says, he can do that. And so that's great feedback for us. I'm guessing that's kind of common, that we all do things for them they could do for themselves. And sometimes, changing the environment on that helps you to learn that.
Right. And another thing, and these are all things to keep in mind as you're processing this. Oh, go ahead.
Quick question. I made this.
We need you to use.
How far distance wise is your physical home from Noah's?
Okay. How far is our house from Noah's house?
Yeah.
So we are without traffic. We're about 45 minutes. So, but Noah's we're all outside of the DC area. So,
and that's really good in our situation, right? Because our community and our house and us are the triggers for behaviors. And so if it were 10 minutes away or 5 minutes away, we do not think that would be a very good situation in our particular. I
don't know if this is something just to Noah or if it's a set me too thing, but Noah is incredibly good with directions. He knows roads, he knows highways. We think he recognizes or reads signs. So anytime he is in our hometown, he is obsessed with, he loves our church. He grew up in church. He loves going to our church. He's obsessed with going to church. Church happens to be between town and our house. So that was always a nightmare. Noah went through a phase where he tried to jump out of the car a lot of times because he wanted to go to the lube center or church. So if we were driving down the highway at 65 miles an hour and church is through that field, he would try to open the door. So it just became, and there were tons of triggers around our town, and he would try to control us and go there, go there, go there. So when we started looking, we were in crisis. We didn't have a lot of choices as to when you have behaviors being the main reason you're looking for residential, Not everybody will take you. So that limits who will take you. And I wanted him to be able to stay. He was currently in a private special ed school, and I wanted him to stay in the same school so he had that daily consistency. So we were looking for the residential side, not the day side. And we were able to find a home right near his school in Rockville, Maryland is where he is. So it worked out really well for us. It just happened to really, really work out well. And now it's not, he's close enough. It's not too bad. All right, how do I?
I'm gonna do it.
Oh, you're gonna do it. Okay. All right.
I was.
That doesn't, okay. Todd did the slides here. Don't you like the slides, the pictures? So we've joked around about like later in life, maybe we just will live on a cruise ship and go from cruise ship to cruise ship. Cause that seems like a really cheap, affordable. I don't know if you guys have known people that have those like memberships with cruise ships, but it's like the cheapest housing you could possibly get. But options, right? Your loved one could live with you as long as possible, and then maybe move in with a sibling later in life. So staying with the family, that is an option. Home ownership, believe it or not, can be an option. You could either leave a house to them in their name, you could leave it in a trust. In most states, housing and like one vehicle are not counted as part of their like assets. So you have to check with your state to check with, I mean, that's a national thing with Medicaid and Social Security, but home ownership usually does not hinder. The problem though is Medicaid is a payback program. So if you're getting Medicaid funding and that house is in their name, when they pass, Medicaid can take the home. So, but home ownership there are programs out there for lower income, and starting to see that we have more and more kids with SAT-V2 that are varying degrees of how much they're impacted by SAT-V2. So there might be an individual here that is able to hold down a full-time job and have a decent income and, need minimal supports, that maybe home ownership is a possibility. So that's, don't rule that out. That might be an option for some. Living in a rental apartment or a home. And the easiest way and best way to get that, we'll talk about that, is Section 8 housing or a voucher program. Living in an agency-run group home or alternative living unit. Those are two terms you're going to hear: group home and ALU. The difference is the number of people. Most states have limited that the maximum in a group home usually can be 4. Every state's trying to get away from this more institutional style living. So Noah is in a regular house in a neighborhood. You wouldn't really know driving by that there's anything different about his house.
You'll see a picture of it
Yeah,
later.
we'll show you. Alternative living unit is, think, limited. It's smaller, like down to like 1 or 2 people, and group homes usually 3 to 4. It's pretty much the same thing. And then innovative ideas at the end of this, if you guys like later pull this up on your computer and click, I put in a ton of different alternative kind of innovative ideas across the country that are happening. I know there's somewhere in the Carolinas where there's this rundown neighborhood that a bunch of families got together and bought up like 50 houses and started renovating them. And then in that neighborhood, you've got like one house that's kind of a group home setting, and then you've got another house that's like, typical couple, and but they have a son with disability, and then you've got just, but it's known moving into this neighborhood that you are part of this community. And there's kind of this responsibility that everyone looks out for everybody else. And it's just kind of a creative, we have another one I'm going to share with you that's happening in our town. But there are some creative things happening. And those of you with, kind of younger, maybe you get together with a group and you develop something, right? You be the creative ones to develop something and get something going. All right, next slide.
Okay.
Oh, I'm clicking, sorry. All right, so basics. If you have not applied in your state for your Developmental Disability Association, on the resources, there's a list to the national page, so you can see what's in your state. In Maryland, it's DDA, Developmental Disability Administration. It's called different. Every state has one. You apply as soon as you know your loved one has a developmental disability, you apply, whether it's 1-year-old, 20. Typically in most states, if you get in before the 22nd birthday, there's often kind of programs to kind of get you right from school into services. If you wait till after that, you kind of go to the bottom of the waiting list. So really important to make sure that you're signed up, probably, or Most of you in this room think you're already signed up with your state's developmental disability program.
And don't wait. We
Yes.
got some bad advice when Noah was very young. We used autism waiver services and we got some bad advice from a teacher who said he's not eligible yet, so don't worry about that. Well, that was bad advice because when we actually did sign up, then we were on a waiting list and he would have been ready to go had we just signed up when we were thinking about it. So don't wait on signing up for any of those things.
So housing is almost always separate from staffing. So what I mean by that is, like, even though Noah is in a group home, his DDA services do not pay for the actual housing cost. So everyone in his group home is treated as an individual, and they're all kind of given, they get a letter from the state that they decide what their contribution of care is. And there's a formula for them to calculate that. So Noah right now pays $375 a month for his rent. So the agency, in kind of the profit that they make, because you have 4 boys, saying all 4 boys are paying that. So that's like less than $1,600 a month. Rent there is probably $3,500 a month, close to it. So that agency in their profits pays the difference. That's part of their overhead cost. But they are not allowed to charge him more than $375 for the actual rent. Some agencies might pay like an activities fee, or typically they'll want to be his rep payee. We've said no to all that. So we pay for everything straight. I want to know exactly where his money's going. So you can kind of negotiate that. You've usually a little bit of room to negotiate those types of things. Staffing is what is paid for through his Medicaid waiver, through his services. Noah's cost, I don't have it on the top of my head. Noah's cost is well into the middle 200,000s a year. It's amazing what his cost of services are. He has one-on-one services, daytime. And so in his day hab program, he has one-on-one services. He has one-on-one services in the group home, and Noah is the one in the house. And what you'll typically find in a group home setting is they'll try to have one individual in the house that qualifies for awake overnight staffing. So Noah is the kid that needs the awake overnight staffing. He doesn't have the sleep issues that he used to have, but with SATB2, he has sleep issues. And just requires more, right? So they will try to make sure one individual in the house qualifies for that, so that they have round the clock paid for staffing. Otherwise, most houses will still have awake overnight, but it's harder for them to get funding if they don't have somebody with a higher need level. So you'll see that in a lot of the houses.
And we have found, we haven't been told this by them, but we believe that because Noah has that awake overnight funding, we believe that that gives us a fair amount of kind of negotiating power with that agency, right? Because I think it's a really good deal for them to have Noah. And so that, sometimes we try not to overplay that, but sometimes that comes in handy.
Yeah, we keep that in the back of our minds. Like when we're, unhappy with something or negotiating something, they want to keep us happy. So even though we don't get to like pick his staff and hire staff, if there's staff that we're unhappy with, I just call the head director and say, we don't want this person working with him. We've seen some things maybe that we don't like, and they've got him out of there pretty quickly. So it does. And most of you, I have to say, probably a lot of your kids might qualify, for that higher level of need. So it might be something that you.
What's the trigger for qualification there?
I'm sorry?
What's the trigger for qualifying for this overnight?
Awake overnight.
What makes you qualify for awake overnight? Every state's going to have a different. In our state, it's going to be things like, do they elope or wander at night? Are there, behaviors, any kind of behaviors, any kind of health issues, seizures, things like that. So there's kind of different listings. Every state's going to have some kind of matrix scoring to determine your level of need, right? So in Maryland, we used to have it, we've switched it over. Now they use this health risk screening tool, the HRST, which is a national thing. And so Noah's always been at the highest end of that, right? So it always just kind of, that puts you, then the states base what your staffing ratio is based on your score. So when you're being interviewed and when you're talking to these agencies, it is the worst day, right? Like Noah, I would say 99% of the time is this delightful, sweet kid. And then that 1%, it's unbelievable. Well, when they ask me what is life like with Noah, I tell them about the 1%, right? I don't tell him about the, sweet Noah who's kissing and hugging me. I tell him about the Noah who's got me to the ground, right? That's the Noah I share, unfortunately.
And we
But
learned that along the way. We had very mixed feelings about that when he was younger. Like, we didn't want a diagnosis of autism, right? We were worried about that label and whatever. We found that opened up a lot of services to us. And so at one point we embraced that diagnosis of autism, right? Even though it's not classic autism, but same thing on these screening tools. You don't want your son or daughter to be kind of labeled with this or whatever, but it opens up services that make their life better. And so
Right.
to some degree, you gotta wrestle with that in your own mind and get past some of that stuff if you want the services that come along with the higher score on the matrix or the label that you may otherwise prefer to avoid.
So the next thing is, if you have not looked into supplemental security income, the difference here, supplemental security income is needs-based. It's not an earnings like those, we're going to retire and get our social security income. Supplemental security income is completely needs-based. So prior to 18, you can get supplemental security income, your loved one can, but it's income-based. Noah wasn't able to get it earlier because he eventually qualified for this autism waiver. So they waived the family income and Noah was able to get into the program and able to get Medicaid and SSI prior to 18. So I don't think he got any payments, but he still qualified for Medicaid. At 18, he started getting his supplemental security income. It was a small amount because he lived at home with us. We said that he paid rent. But by 18, at least by 18, make sure you're contacting Social Security, explaining that you have a loved one, son or daughter with a developmental disability, and you believe they're going to qualify for supplemental security income. The maximum right now is $789.
It's the eight, they just.
Yeah, it just changed, but it's a set amount. And there's the max you could get is close to 800 now, around there. And that again is determined by, this form you fill out. Are they paying rent? Are they living on their own? Are they living at home? All kind of a scenario of things. So if they are living at home, yes, you are charging them rent, right? And there's you can get help in how to file out those forms. But definitely by 18, get them on the supplemental security income. That is their ticket into Medicaid if they already aren't into Medicaid. So they're tied together. So they're needs-based. Medicaid is needs-based.
And that was another area that we had to wrestle with mentally. When we first started that process, we're like, we don't want people to think we're charging our kid rent to live in our house, but that's what we needed to get him established in the SSI and to go along with the Medicaid and all that kind of stuff. And so once again, you have to kind of get past some of those things you might otherwise be thinking.
Right. And so I put in my resource list, I have the list for the SSI link. I have the DDA link and I have Medicaid link. So all of that is in the resources for you to start to kind of research.
Did you say that you had the autism waiver that the SSI?
So if you already have an autism waiver, it's going to depend on your state. So ours in Maryland, our autism waiver is run through the school systems, but it's a Medicaid-based program, and you have to qualify for Medicaid in order to get the autism waiver. And what they do, and part of the reason it's called waiver, is they waive the family income, right? And then they look at the individual as just that individual, and they don't look at the parent's income. So look into your state, see if you have anything like that. I know our kids, some have autism diagnoses, some don't. I think it's easier to get now with SATB2 because autism's kind of been linked to it. Back when we were starting, we had a hard time getting an autism diagnosis because they were like, well, because he's very atypical. He likes to watch people, he's just not your typical individual with autism, but he has enough that we were able to finally get a diagnosis. So you had a question.
Was there any strategy to the amount of rent that you voiced that he was paying, like in terms of the services?
So in order to determine, like when you're saying you're going to charge your child rent in your own home for supplemental security income purposes, if you just Google it, you'll find solution like answers. But typically what they do is they would say like, what is typical rent in your house? Or if you're paying a mortgage, and we had 6 individuals in our house. So I just kind of took our household income or household bills, our expenditures, and divided everything by 6. So, you know, he was paying a 1/6 of the groceries, a 1/6 of our mortgage, a 1/6 of, and that's kind of how, and that's kind of a standard that you can use. So
Or you can look at what your house would rent for in your area, right? And divide
and
that.
do a portion that way.
Yes.
So I had it all prepared and then they never really even asked me for those details. So, you know, I was all ready and they didn't even ask for it. So
I don't know if you heard my question yesterday when I spoke, if you were in there yesterday when the lady spoke about, you know, guardianship and all that. So I got SSI for Jack last year and they gave me us the minimum amount. Even though they asked how much would you pay if somebody was renting, and all my friends have said, you say $400 and he's paying for, you know, for rent. And so then that's happened to other friends of mine. So I went back, they go, you just go back and you tell them that, you know, you have to pay 400 and then the rest is. And they denied me. They said, oh no, your mortgage is more than that. And see, I have 2 older children. So Jack's my youngest. So there's only 3 of us in the house now. Well, because you only have 3 in your house, you know, it made no sense what she was saying. But then everyone's saying, oh, you don't want to go back because they could totally deny you. And I'm like, oh, yesterday I told me to go back. But like now he's only getting 580 versus 800.
right. If you're working with any state agencies like your DDA or whatever, sometimes different agencies will have like a specialist that kind of will help you navigate the Social Security and Medicaid and things like that. It depends on how the agencies are set up. But sometimes they'll have one person that like, as you're entering in, they help you navigate those things. So ask, is there anyone in your office that's really good, you know, with navigating Social Security? The other thing, if you are involved with doors at all, if anybody, we have doors, Department of Rehab Services. So every state calls it a different thing, but every state has some type of rehabilitative employment, right? So as you're entering, it's going to be one of those things as you're leaving the high school and into adult services, you're going to hear about it in an IEP meeting about, and they're going to help with just employment skills. They also, through that program, or through like the Ticket to Work program through Social Security, you can get a benefits counselor that will help figure out some of those things. So there's people that specialize in that. You just kind of have to do a little digging to find those specialists. Because Social Security, especially now after COVID, is so hard to deal with. You can't even walk in an office half the time and talk to them. Yeah. So Todd is the mic. So any other, because I guess they're doing virtual and they can't hear us. So if anybody else has questions. So housing vouchers are kind of so you have traditional housing like Noah is in with the group home. The other way that you're going to fund something, I mean, unless you're just, you know, independently wealthy and can fund it, great. But even folks in our area, I work with a couple of people who come from a lot of money. They still use housing vouchers. Depending on where you are, like in our county where Todd and I are, the housing voucher has not been open for 10 years and there's no sign of it opening up. The county that Noah is in, we have him on the waiting list. I probably won't use it because it's going so well with where he is, but we went ahead and signed him up anyway, just as a kind of a backup plan. But the housing voucher, the difference between a housing voucher and public housing is a housing voucher, you're going to get that ticket, right? Some people call it the golden ticket. And typically you can pretty much use it almost anywhere. And it's going to give you that discounted, you know, subsidy that you're looking for. So typically it's 30% of your income is the max that you're going to pay in rent is kind of the standard. So I have a lot of folks that I work with that I support that get a housing voucher. Then after the housing voucher, you have public housing, and you also have the Section 8. I forgot to put the Section 8 thing in here, but typically Section 8 is specific housing, right? Like you can take your Section 8 voucher and go use it at a specific place. And that's a little broader than public housing, but then you also have public housing, which would be, in my opinion, the last place you'd probably want to go, because typically everyone there is going to be, it's going to be lower income. They're not usually in the best neighborhoods. So that would probably be my last choice, but it doesn't hurt to get your name on waiting list in lots of places, especially those of us that are dealing with behaviors and dealing with, you know, like if you're in crisis and you just really need options, it doesn't hurt to get your name on a lot of these waiting lists. You can have your name on multiple waiting lists. So
You can always say no when your turn comes up.
yes. So that, like I said, the biggest difference is kind of when you look at adult services and you look at your state's developmental disability waiver, whatever your waiver program is, most states you're going to have, I think all states now have two choices. You're going to have traditional services, which would be your group home, your day hab programs, you know, all traditional services. And then you're going to split out this way and you're going to have kind of more self-directing. You could live in, like, get a voucher and then still go to a day hab. That's a you know, like, you can mix some things. In most states, you can't do residential group home and then self-direct the other portion. If you go that route, you're pretty much going all traditional services. So you kind of have to navigate your state and how, you know, like, kind of learn, once we get into adult services, what are our routes? What are our options? And then which housing falls under which. But like I said, I think staying open-minded to all the housing options and getting your name on a waiting list and making sure you have the funding sources, you're connected to them. So, and make sure you have the Social Security, signed up with your DDA, and you're set to get Medicaid as early as possible.
But have you used this so people at home can hear?
I love the resources you're providing and sharing. How do we find our local state resources? Internet is great, but then I find resources that are not relevant to me.
Okay, at the end of this, I did put like the NASD, I forget what it's called, the National Association of Developmental Disability Services. And in there, you can pick your state and get connected that way. And then Social Security, I just put the SSI link. Again, these other programs, oftentimes like the DDAs, will help you navigate. In our state, when you contact DDA and you fill out the original application, if you're 18, they're going to help you with supplemental security income. You should get a coordinator, a service coordinator that will help you navigate that. You should be able to ask them questions and they should be able to help you. If you're not happy with your coordinator, whoever you get, and they can't seem to answer any questions, ask for a different coordinator. You know, try to ask them how many years of experience. It's an entry-level job, so kids will come right out of college and they know nothing. So if you can, start talking to older friends and who's your coordinator, and try to get in with a coordinator that knows what they're doing, because that can really make a huge, huge difference. If you get a coordinator, you know, that is right out of school, doesn't have much experience with disabilities, I've been shocked at how unprofessional and like just the lack of knowledge. I've been really shocked that they're even in these positions. So make sure you know, fight to get somebody good that's going to help you. That's going to be a key to your success. So when you go the traditional route, we talked already a little bit about the group home setting. This is actually Noah's house. He just moved April, I think. He was in a house from 2019, right? 2016 to the spring, and it was a rental, and the program was trying to purchase a house. They put 40 offers and they didn't get a single one. So they had no choice but to find another rental, which was not their choice. They want to own all their homes. They want all their homes to be ranch houses, to be accessible. So they're moving towards that. But right now in our area, rentals are hard to find, but purchasing a home in the DC area is just really, really hard to find. And they couldn't justify spending $100,000 over market value. So they rented this house. It's actually really, I have a picture of Noah's room later, but it's really pretty inside. They're in a busy neighborhood, but they're in a cul-de-sac. They have we took over Noah's basketball court, so they go for walks every night, play basketball. He lives, like I said, with 3 other guys. There's almost always at least 2 staff, even overnight. A lot of times there's 2 staff, but there's always 2 staff up until about midnight. And then from like maybe midnight to 5, 6 a.m., there might be 1 staff. Typically there's 3 or 4 staff. The house is very busy with staff. Noah loves busy. Noah loves lots of people. He grew up with a busy, crazy household. So he loves it there. He loves it there. When he comes home with Todd and I, it's just the 3 of us. You know, that's not his favorite thing. Again, Noah pays, his rent is determined by his contribution of care. So he's paying $375 out of his close to $800 a month in his Social Security, supplemental security. So we find it very doable. You know, we pitch in for fun things and things like that, but I often find he can't go over that $2,000 max to get the waiver and to get the services and to get supplemental security income. You have to keep your assets to 2,000. I often find that like I'm having to spend him down a little bit. You know, after a few months of, you know, getting, you know, that's the third month. I find that I am often, you know, he's got a little too much money. So well, what do you want to get, Noah? You know, we need a new iPad or we need, you know, so for us, it works, you know, it's working. We feel like he has, you know, we feel like he has plenty. So to go into a couple scenarios, John I work with, John is in our self-directed program in Maryland. He lives in an apartment complex in Rockville. It's called Main Street. And I put the link in the resource section. Main Street was started.
And John and his parents gave permission for us to
Yes.
use
yes,
John's story.
Yes. John lives, this program called Main Street was started by another mom at the school where Noah went to school, was private special ed school. He's in an accessible apartment building. It's in the downtown. So in Rockville, there's like this downtown center, there's restaurants, movie theater, you know, it's a pretty busy town. 25% of the building's 70 units are set aside for adults with disabilities. And 75% of the units are affordable. So they're already lower rent. And on top of that, John has the golden ticket, the voucher. So he only pays 30% of his income. So he's getting both subsidies. So he's doing very well. And as you can see, his apartment is beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. The building was finished in the last 5 years. It's very new, right before COVID. They, in the down lower level, they have a 10,000 square foot community area. They have coffee shop, little restaurant, lots of folks with disabilities work there. They have all kinds of activities. They have classes, yoga classes, art classes. And so another young man I support who lives in a small house with his mom, and she turned the upstairs into his apartment, just about a mile away from this. And right near, he's like walking distance to Noah's house. He goes to Main Street every day to take art stream classes, to do yoga. So he's a member of the Main Street Club, but he doesn't live there. So, but they also encourage others from the community to take the classes. And they do. It's like, I didn't think they would, but I actually went and visited one day and I was like shocked to see how many typical folks were joining in on the yoga class and encouraging those. So it is really a really neat community and program. Let's see. So right now, John's parents have been supporting him. He's been in traditional services. So he moved in here and an agency was providing personal support staff for him. Well, the agency since COVID has not been able to find staff. So I actually was talking to John's dad at Special Olympics, Noah and John do bocce together, and was saying, well, why don't you go to self-direction? And why don't you hire your own staff? I said, do you know people that would work with him? And in our state, self-direction, we're paying in his area with the exemption, the average max rate is about $30 an hour. We can actually pay more than that if we can prove there's a need for it. So we can pay typically better. Noah's staff at his house get paid in the teens. And in self-direction, we can pay up to 30. So you hire, you fire, you interview, that John is actually the employer of record in self-directed services. So for John, it works. John has a job at the Smithsonian. He's cleans for the Smithsonian. He's a federal employee, gets all the federal benefits. I mean, John's got a great life. So for him, this is a perfect program for him. His dad is working towards making it sustainable. How are we going to make sure that staff get hired once mom and dad aren't able to help do that? So we're looking at kind of setting things up so this will be sustainable. And what we're probably going to do is out of John's trust that will go into effect when his parents pass is we're going to hire somebody that kind of becomes dad. That person will help hire staff for John, and that will be paid for out of his trust. So the creative ways to think about how am I going to support my loved one when I'm not here, not able to do it. He has a sister right now. She loves him. She's super close to him, but she's not part of any of the daily, weekly organization or planning of his life. Parents are hoping that changes, but they don't want to put pressure on her. They want her to be able to go do her thing. So we'll see, as I'm trying to build a relationship with her, hoping that I'll work with John for a while and maybe get her involved a little more. So we'll see. So here's Noah's house. Noah loves Herbie the love bug. So I also did ask these guys. So Hassan is to Noah's left. He lives in the house. He has special needs, super high functioning. And we love Noah being in a house with a mixed group of individuals. Like, we don't want him in with folks that are all nonverbal. We want him with a mixture of folks. Hassan's going to eventually move out to his own apartment. I know it. I'm dreading it, but I know it. Hassan will text me and say, hey, Miss Steph, can you call me? And I'll call him and he'll say, so-and-so just talked to Noah and he was really mean to him. I don't like the way he talks to Noah. So then I'll say to Hassan, because he knows I won't rat him out. This has been going on for 6 years. Hassan was the second guy to move in the house after Noah. And I'll say, well, what's his shift? When's he going to be back? And I'll pop in and I'll just kind of hang out and I'll listen to that person and I'll hear them talk. Usually I'll catch them talking to somebody else like that. Because typically if that's the way they interact with the young guys, they'll do it again. So a couple times Hassan and I together have gotten the bad seeds out of the house, so he's been our support through this. Taylor is behind Noah in the green. Taylor and Noah, I've built this phenomenal relationship that I never knew possible. Taylor is verbal, hard to understand. He can write and read, but very, very hard to understand. So I just give him my phone and he just texts. He loves Noah, loves him. So when Noah's not there, he walks around the house pacing. Where Noah key, where Noah key, where Noah key, where Noah key. That's all he says. Where's Noah? Where's Noah? We don't know why the Noah key, but so they'll FaceTime me. You want to call him? Taylor, you want a picture of Taylor? You have it on the phone. So Noah wants a picture of them. Whenever we're away from them, Noah starts showing us these pictures because Noah loves his house. He loves going there. And all of them, one of the things we love about his, and in searching, if you go the group home route, ask them, what do the evenings look like? What do the activities look like? One of the things that I have found, I used to work as a coordinator for the state. Some agencies will tell you, well, we only have one staff person at night. So if the guys want to go out of the house or do something, they have to go together, right? Like, you can't individualize. Noah's agency is very good. There's one car for the house, but we're in an area where there's lots of public transportation. Hassan works at a grocery store and he takes like a transit bus to, like a special needs transit bus. But I try to coordinate with the other moms. So all of the boys we have what's called Spirit Club in our area, and all the boys do yoga one night and an exercise class another night. And 3 of the boys go together. So we try to make it easier on the staff and knowing that there's one car, but Noah comes all the way up to us almost an hour away to do horseback riding one night a week. And I go get him, but then staff meets me at the end. He'll come home for dinner and then staff meets me a good 45 minutes up the road.
It's one of the great benefits of Noah having a high score on the matrix. And so he gets one-on-one services, right? And so he has staff dedicated to him for those times when we need that kind of flexibility.
Right. So, but because there are agencies that I have worked with and I get so frustrated with them because they don't see the need, like the individuals don't, in the evenings, they come home from day program, they don't have options to go do things out in the community because the staffing isn't there, the funding in the program isn't there. So those are things, if you go the traditional route, that you really need to ask them, like, well, my loved one likes a busy lifestyle. Behaviors for us are way down the busier we keep our schedule.
Or there's some that Stephanie has worked with over the years that have the staffing, but they've just gotten this rut that this is what we do. We just come and sit, which is really easy on the staff and nobody challenges that. And so therefore they take the easiest, the path of least resistance.
Right. We're very fortunate. The agency he is in is called Community Options. It's a national agency. It has not been perfect. There are things about them I don't like, but they are true to their name and really want him involved in the community. So when there's an activity last weekend, perfect example, very last minute on Friday, I contacted, it was just Noah and Josh there for the weekend. And I could go through this constant. I've kind of traded my peaceful home now that didn't used to be so peaceful without Noah there. So now it's peaceful, but now I kind of have a little more guilt. You trade one for the other. And I just want him to have a fun life. So Friday night, we were in the car and I heard an ad for the circus coming to the National Harbor. I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. So I contacted the other guy, Josh, I contacted his mom and said, what do you think? Should we have the boys go to the circus tomorrow? So she's like, great idea. Okay. So I contact the house manager. I'm like, okay, I want to buy 4 tickets, so we pay for the staff, I bought Noah's ticket, the staff ticket, I paid for parking. But the staff was like, this is great. And then the one guy, we saw him on Sunday, the one staff, and most of Noah's staff, in fact, all of his staff right now are from Africa. They're all different countries in Africa. They're all African immigrants, very hardworking individuals. I love them. I usually have some language barrier, to get over with some of them. But this young man, Bertram, just told, this is the first time I've ever been to something like that. And he loved it. And he was telling me, he goes, Noah and I were cheering and clapping. And, it's just, they had a great time. He sent me pictures of them at the circus. So we're very happy with the fact that we found an agency that, is willing to kind of make things happen. They'll go out of their way to make things happen. So go the traditional route, definitely start interviewing and researching, talk to older families, find out what they like and don't like about the agencies they're working with. All right, so this is Ed. So Ed is a man that I have been working with probably 8 to 10 years. I met Ed, I was first his coordinator for his DDA services. And then I started going into self-direction and became his support broker. He lives in his family's house. His parents, he has 5 siblings. He's one of 6. They have a beautiful home that they adapted the whole downstairs, made it fully accessible for him. He has the track systems. He's quadriplegic, cerebral palsy, quadriplegic, has a little bit of use of his right arm that allows him to steer his, left arm, to steer his wheelchair. Perfectly mentally fine. I mean, so intelligent. He's amazing, hysterical, funny. Has the most family.
And has a crush on Stephanie.
I had actually went to bingo one night and brought my husband and son so he could see that I was married. I'm like, because he's very flirtatious. He's super, but he's just flirtatious with every woman. But he's just this wonderful guy. He's absolutely wonderful. But his parents adapted this home, and the plan eventually was for him to go into a group home. And the siblings started to talk to the parents and say, he's not going to make it. His needs are so specific. They were like, we don't think he'll survive long if he goes into a group home. So they started talking as a family. Well, what can we do? Well, mom passed away unexpectedly. Then dad started getting ill, had a lot of health issues. And his sister, Mary Lou, said, when you're no longer able to care for him, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to move in with you. So she was making good money. She worked in the banking industry. She quit her job, moved in with the dad, helped care for the dad and Ed. All of the siblings, most of the siblings live in the area. So right now he has 5 staff, 2 nephews, and 3 siblings. That
And
support him
self-directed services allowed for the family to be hired as his staff.
as a staff.
And so they want to help him anyway, and this allows them to make that their income doing that.
Yes. So, so Mary Lou lives there. So we worked it out this year. We added the 5th staff this year. He has a younger cousin, Travis, that he worked at at a local university from 12 to 5 every day for the last 25 years. And he retired right at the beginning of COVID. And he and his cousin Travis nephew get along fantastic and wanted to start doing stuff together. And I said, well, why don't we hire Travis to be your daytime guy? And he goes, well, what about Mary Lou? And I said, she's with you 24/7. We can put her hours other places, right? Like we can be creative with this because she is I mean, he can't do anything for himself. Nothing. Cannot feed himself, cannot shower, can't do anything. So Mary Lou is definitely working more than 40 hours a week. So we just moved her schedule. We asked for some more hours. We got approved. So he just started in this new plant, and I called him the other day and he and Travis were at some racetrack somewhere. I'm like, where are you? He goes, I forget the name of it. We're watching races. I'm like, you go, Ed. I mean, he volunteers for his fire company, ambulance fire company. He has these bright lights that they put up on his wheelchair, and he rides around, stops traffic. I mean, he's living his life. He's living his life. So, another, here is a family home and the home is in the sister's name because they didn't want to lose it to Medicaid. So the home is, when the dad passed, got transferred into the sister's name. Ed does not have a trust. They decided not to do a trust. He does get Social Security income because he earned income because he worked for 25 years. and the family just pitches in and helps out. And it's beautiful. It's absolutely a beautiful scenario. I don't think that could happen for a lot of us. Most of us, our kids are not going to stay within, all of his siblings live probably within a 10-mile radius. So that is Ed's story. So then I have a couple pages of resources. And I think these are posted on the site, right? Did everyone sign up for the virtual? You should be able to access these slides, and we can ask Allison how to, but if you get the actual link, then you can just click on these and take them. The second page, taking some photos. The second page is all the innovative housing ideas that I've kind of found around the country. There's some pretty neat places. And it's funny because Todd and I laugh that, they've gotten rid of institutions, and for a very good reason. I've supported about 10 individuals that came out of Rosewood near Baltimore, Maryland. And there was actually several documentaries done about Rosewood. A lot of abuse occurred. It was a horrible place. And I've heard their stories firsthand. Most of them, their families left them there when they were little. And the one lady I supported didn't stop seeing her parents when she was about 12 years old. Most of them, by the time they got moved out of Rosewood and into the community, once they shut it down, nobody had any family left. They didn't know they had no contact with their families. Incredibly sad stories. So I definitely see like the reason for getting rid of the institutions, but we laugh because we think Noah would hit the perfect place for him would be like a college dorm. He would love it, right? Like you go to a cafeteria, you see all these people, like you're living in, real tight community. He would thrive in a setting like that. Like that would be, if I could pick one place that I think he would love the most, it would be like a college dorm, but what's close to a college dorm? Senior living, nursing home. That's kind of close to, right? Like, so, and that's very institutional. So some of these places you'll see, like they kind of have a little bit more of that feel to them. Like they're very community based, but some of them are a little more higher number of disability and less inclusive. And some are far more inclusive. So it's a really broad, I feel like I was super scattered on, it was really like broad on but I just wanted to give everyone an idea of what is out there. Housing is the hardest thing in adult services to get. You really do have to start showing there's a need for it. If your young one has lots of behaviors, start getting that documented. Start showing that there's a high level of need. We actually started contacting, we actually called 911 a couple times. Then we saw the first time we called him, the police officer took him for a ride in his police car. I was like, no, because now what's he going to do? He's going to act out and hit me so that he can go for a ride in a police car, right? Like he got this positive reinforcement. So we actually had kind of a talk with our local emergency folks and came up with a plan, and they marked our number so that whenever we called in, they would know that, okay, Noah lives there, Noah has special needs, and they kind of had a protocol. And most states are our area is really, we had a tragedy happen where a young man was killed at our movie theater. And the mom has done a lot of advocacy and training our police force. So we have like autism specialists within our local police force around most of the state of Maryland. So you might have that as well. But if you're in that situation with your child in that crisis where there's behaviors, and especially in their late teen years, and you don't hesitate to call, then you have a record, right? So then when you go to say, because a lot of times getting housing, especially the traditional route of housing through a group home or alternative living unit, you have to show a need. You have to show that you're in crisis.
And that's what we eventually did. Was Noah had a behavior, a meltdown, and we called and they took him in the ambulance to the hospital, and he can't come home, right? Which was terrible, right? Terrible thing to say as a parent, but somebody had advised us to say, that's how you create the crisis that's going to lead to housing, right? Because if you just keep taking them back home, the agencies will be happy to say, look, we don't need to solve this problem, right? So he went one day in the ambulance, and we were there every day, all day in the hospital with him, right? So we didn't abandon him, but we said, home is not an option anymore.
Right. So we spent 5.5 weeks in the hospital. It was the worst 5.5 weeks of my life. I was there from 6 a.m. till midnight. And working with social workers, working, battling. Noah was 18 going on 19. So wasn't a youth, wasn't 21 when traditional adult services start. He was still in school. The school system said he has no behaviors in the school, so we're not going to pay for housing. So we had about a 3-month battle. So we made an agreement that we would bring him home, but he had our autism waiver only allowed, I forget how many, 40 hours a week. So we got additional services. So we had around the clock staffing in our home for like the next 2 months, which was very awkward, but we had to have it. Todd had to leave for work every day knowing that there was a chance that he was going to really hurt me or one of our kids, because he's the oldest. I was sharing with her earlier that my younger 2 boys, they're 6'6" and like solid muscle, and Noah can take them to the ground when he goes into one of these spells, one of these fits. So it was, we were living on edge, and we didn't realize how much we had turned, like made all of these accommodations for him in our home until after he moved out. And I thought how hard that must have been for my younger kids, to go to a friend's house and see how normal people live, and then come home and see we can't have anything on the walls. Like we have nothing in our kitchen drawers because you can't have silverware or forks or knives because he's going to use them, right?
Hey, babe, we got 2 questions here,
Okay,
so I'm going
go
to take
ahead.
this. We got one in the room here, and then we got one on
I love the session, I have to say.
Okay.
You mentioned support broker.
Yes.
How do we find one and when do you start?
So when you get connected with your local developmental disability administration, whatever that is in your state, if you guys need help with that, my email's not on here, but I have cards. I'll give you guys my cards. But get in touch with them. Then you're going to talk to them about, okay, when we qualify in your state, it's going to be a Medicaid waiver. Medicaid waivers match federal funding, right? So once you get into this waiver, it's a 50-50 program with these state Medicaid waivers. Once you get into that waiver program, then you want to know what your options are for how can I get services? And there's going to be traditional and this self-directed, might be called something different in different states, but typically it's a self-directed model and a traditional model. From that point, you are going to then ask, okay, if I have self-directed, is there a support broker that can help me? So I'm funded under that self-directed plan. So that's how I'm able to work with folks, because I'm in there. Once you leave the school system and you have an IEP, you're going to go into adult services. In Maryland, it's a PCP, a person-centered plan. Kind of a joke because it's really not very person-centered. You have to fight for it to be person-centered, just like the IEP oftentimes isn't individualized. So you're just going to kind of take what you've learned from the IEP and try to implement that into the adult services.
Okay, now we're going to take the other question.
Okay, it's multi-part, and I know we're short with time, so we can follow up with anything you can't answer. This is from Katie online. Just to clarify, are you saying that with an autism waiver, a child under the age of 18 can qualify for SSI despite the parent's income? If so, what can the SSI be used towards when under the age of 18? Can it be used for medical bills?
So you will technically qualify for SSI in order to get the Medicaid. You have to have supplemental security income. You have to qualify through Social Security to get the Medicaid part. Medicaid is then where the waiver funding typically comes from in most states. Whether or not you qualify for the income piece of Social Security is very individual, on your circumstances and your needs. And I can't remember, do we remember if Noah received? I don't think he received funding, supplemental security funding till he was 18, but he qualified for the Medicaid waiver through Social Security prior to 18. So it's.
And was getting Medicaid as a supplement to our income. So that took care, he never had co-pays or anything because he had our insurance plus the Medicaid as a secondary.
Yes, and Medicaid's always going to be a secondary. If you continue them on your private health insurance, Medicaid will always be the secondary because it's always the payer of last resort.
And then lastly, is autism the only developmental disability waiver available for SSI?
So every state's different on what's offered waiver wise. And again, that whether or not you get the income piece of the Social Security is totally individualized based on your circumstances and your needs. But I know some states have multiple waivers and other states have none. So that is just a very state specific. I can't really answer that. Any other
Yeah.
questions?
I'm sorry we didn't put an email address on here, and for those of you watching at home, so Steph's email address is Steph, STEPH, Watkins, WATKINS, LLC @gmail.com. Steph Watkins, LLC @gmail.com.
Might have been listed on.
All right, we're
Allison's
getting the hook over here from the door. So it's time to wrap up. Thank you guys very much.
I'll leave that to them. That's theirs.
Here's business cards if anybody wants one.